If you don't watch many of my videos, this is the one for you. This is where I'm going to talk about all the 5-star reads I've read this year. I've put them in order of shittiest 5-star read to most 6-star 5-star read. And we're going to start with number 30. When I say worst 5-star read, it's still a 5-star read. It's still an amazing book. The Paper Palace by Miranda Cowley Haller. This is a book in multiple timelines. Al has started to cheat on her husband with her best friend Jonas. But then we go back almost 20 years to see traumatic events, and we keep flicking between these two timelines. This is like an intensely feminist novel wrapped up into this like Bold and Beautiful-esque, is she going to leave him, is she going to stay sort of plot, with this really quite dark timeline of Elle's past and what happened. It's a very emotionally engaging novel that I really enjoyed. When going through all the books that I read this year to make this look, there were 2 books that I thought, no, you deserve to be a 5-star. Number 29 on this list is The Bread the Devil Knead by Lisa Allen Augustini. This is the second Woman Prize novel on the list. This one made the shortlist. It is about Althea, who is living on an island in the Caribbean, and she is in an abusive relationship with Leo. Again, this is in 2 timelines, and you get to see what happened to Althea again as she was a child. And again, it's pretty dark, but in comparison, it's still pretty dark for Althea. I think this book really captivates this tension in the novel. You really do know that Leo is going to murder Althea. What you don't know is, will she leave him before that happens? Will something intervene? What will happen? It creates a really tense storyline, but it also creates this vivid and haunting picture of what it would be like inside a relationship with domestic violence. Small Things Like These by Claire Keegan it's an Irish novel about a man and his feelings about an orphanage near him, and it's sort of a blink and you miss novel. It's a lot of ambient setting that is really quite nice and a lovely little build up for what is quite a quick reveal, really. Ruby Fruit Jungle by Rita Mae Brown is a classic LGBT coming of age story. It follows Molly during her formative years and after she leaves home, as she tries to combat a world that is hell-bent on sticking her into a box, on giving her a label, and she completely rejects labels. She is definitely attracted to girls, but still has fun with boys and doesn't apologize for that fun. There's a forthright hedonism to it, like, I deserve sexual pleasure and sexual gratification, and if I'm not hurting anybody, why can't I have it? I love this intense feminism within this intense LGBT novel, as well as a really messed up mother-daughter relationship. Akwaeke Maisie's novel, You Made a Fool of Death with Your Beauty. This is Maisie's debut romance novel. I just thought that this was just a really, really fun, Moorish ride. Again, I think we kind of get a bit of a theme here, but this is a very dark romance for a genre that is, rightly or wrongly, got a reputation for being a bit of a light and fluffy genre. This was pretty dark. Again, like Ruby Fruit Jungle, we've got LGBT themes in this, and we've also got this like feminist themes where we're talking again about your right to sexual gratification and your right to happiness. But with all those themes in it, it's still just a really good, Moorishly fun romance novel that is following those romance traits, and that is what it is first and foremost. Don't go in it expecting to see works like Freshwater. It is not that sort of novel. Wahala by Nikki May is the story of 3 best friends. They all have one parent who is British and white, and one parent who is Nigerian. They all spent various amounts of time in the UK and Nigerian. They all consider themselves Nigerian, and they all consider themselves English. They're all completely different characters, and they're all at different points in their life when a 4th girl, a friend of one of them from childhood, comes along and creates a whole lot of tension within this friendship. It becomes like a real telenovela style drama. At times it's pretty much full-blown ridiculous. It is also a clever satire. It's also poking fun at this idea that Nigerians all know one another when they're a population of over 100 million. I think it's such a clever and well done novel. It's a novel that I read and enjoyed, and I have not been able to get out of my head. It is just slowly got better. I originally gave this book 3 stars and I upped it to 4, and I've upped it to 5 because it is just so clever. And there's so many little things that I'm just like, I didn't get it when I read it, but now that I'm thinking about it, I'm still getting joy from this book. It's awesome. It's the evergreen content in my head. If Beale Street Could Talk by James Baldwin is a classic. It is about a man who goes to jail while his wife is pregnant. It's an intensely black novel, but it is very much focused on this woman and becoming a mother. I think Baldwin is such a talented writer. He's an author that I know I can keep going back to. He puts so many extra themes and extra tidbits into his work that there's always intersections and there's always little nuggets that you didn't quite see the first time. Young Mungo by Douglas Stewart is, of course, Douglas Stewart's follow-up to his Booker Prize-winning novel Shuggie Bain. This follows young Mungo, surprisingly enough, who is a 15-year-old boy who is just figuring out his sexuality. Mungo has an alcoholic mother. He has a brother who is into fighting and gang violence, and his sister is getting messed up in all sorts of weird relationships. This is ultimately an incredibly good book, and I think that, if I'm being objective, I think that this is better than Shuggie Bain. My personal, I preferred Shuggie, but very similar quality. If you liked Shuggie, I can't see you not liking Mungo, and vice versa. The Listeners by Jordan Tannehill. This woman starts hearing this low-pitched noise everywhere. Not everybody can hear this noise, and she keeps talking about this noise and trying to research it and find out more, and everybody's like, no, it doesn't exist. There is no noise. It's been proven that it's not there. She's like, I can definitely hear this noise. And then she finds other people that can hear this noise, and they form a little support network and little clique. And it's clearly a stand-in for conspiracy theories. Not every conspiracy theory is a lie, and it could also be a stand-in for whistleblowers. I love that this is so vague that anybody that is outside of the societal norms gets treated the same way regardless of their credibility. How can you, the reader, possibly have an opinion about whether that noise exists or not? That vagueness means that you're constantly going, is Tannehill talking about abortion rights? Is Tannehill talking about anti-vaxxers? Is Tannehill talking about socialism? What's going on? And you just... It's, for what sounded like quite a trashy novel, it's really good. The Performance by Claire Thomas is a story of 3 women who are at a Thomas Becket play at the theatre in Melbourne. At the same time, there is a bushfire going on, and we get to see portraits of these women through this Thomas Becket play that they're watching. I think this was so wonderfully done as a relatively plotless character portrait novel. I thought that these had such complex and intersecting themes, intersecting characters that all told you more about other characters, and it created quite an interesting and compelling story and narrative, and I never wanted this book to end. Glitterman by Alexis Hall is a romance novel. It's the story of quite a posh man, and he meets quite a common man who is very finely tanned, and there's a bit of judgment going on, but they do fall in love, and there's sort of snobbery and mistreatment going on. It makes a nice story, but what for me really brought this book alive was Alexis Hall's writing. Theoretically, this should just be simple prose, but Alexis Hall is writing pretty. Alexis Hall is writing as pretty as any author I have read. If you like nice writing, you need to pick this book up. My Phantoms by Gwendolyn Riley is a story of a woman who is reflecting on her relationships with her mother and her father. She has a very dysfunctional and broken relationship with her father that has left scars, and that is because he is a bad parent. She has a very broken relationship with her mother too. This book almost becomes a character portrait of the mother as she is going through the later stages of her life, as she is trying to find love. She is one of these people that is almost happy with their misery, and they almost just like they just want to complain. The daughter cannot accept that and is always trying to help the mother, and as a result their relationship is broken and they don't really get along. I think the comparison of the two relationships in here is something that really elevates it, because you have the father-daughter relationship, which is clearly a bad relationship, but there is no doubting the love between the mother and the daughter, yet there's still a bad relationship. I thought that was such a complex thing to try and communicate through a series of examples, and I thought it was really, really well done. Hello Friend, We Miss You by Richard Owain Roberts. Hill has recently lost his wife and he's now helping care for his terminally ill father, who he has a toxic and horrible relationship with, who he doesn't really like. Hill develops feelings for his father's carer, and this is sort of the story of him, and he's very depressed and he's very sad and he's got such negative self-talk. It's another real character portrait, but we see Hill sort of fight to get his life back to some form of normality after all of his people are going. Everybody is leaving Hill. It's not that this novel is sad, but this novel is a wonderful portrait of grief that you will almost be moved to tears just because of how broken Hill is. A Time Outside This Time by Amitabha Kumar. This is such an innovative and bizarre book. I cannot tell you if this is fiction or non-fiction. This is Kumar writing his own story about him writing his own story while he is discussing the news that is going on around him. Ultimately, this is a political satire which is assassinating Modi and is assassinating Trump, is an assassination of the media. It deals with things like fake news and with trust. I always love the comparison between a Western power and any country that isn't Western. When we see this comparison between India and the US, I love that, because I think a lot of the time we look at what's different between different countries, but when we see the common things between these countries, we actually get to learn so much about how power structure works. Glory by No Violet Bulawayo. This is an African anthropomorphized political satire detailing the last days of the Mugabe regime. It is one of the funniest books I have ever read. How Bulawayo is able to take things that are horrible and present them as they are and move that from tragedy into humour and mockery is wonderful. Lean Stand Fall by John McGregor. This is another book that has really improved since I finished reading it. It was always a 5-star book, but I nearly DNF'd this one halfway through. It's a story about a scientist who is stationed at Antarctica. They have a stroke and they lose all ability to understand language, and there's a real big stream of consciousness section where you get to hear this man's thoughts and what's going on. And while he's having the stroke, he's in a vehicle and that vehicle is having an accident, but you're not really sure what's going on other than he randomly says things like upside down. That was really hard to read. Imagine that's exactly what it would feel like talking to somebody who has suffered a stroke when they've lost all their language. It was a wonderful depiction of strokes, but also this relationship between a husband and wife, where the husband spends months and months of the year away from his wife on another continent, and now they've been moved back to the UK for treatment, and they have to go about and rebuild their life when they can't even speak. It was just such a great book. Mayflies by Andrew O'Hagan is definitely my wheelhouse. This is the story of a man who gets terminally ill, wants to travel to Switzerland and kill himself, and he convinces an old friend to help him do that against the wishes of some of his loved ones. And there is also a part of this book taking place many years earlier, detailing the early friendship of these two men and what they sort of mean to each other and how they've helped each other out throughout their life. O'Hagan's use of pacing in this novel was first class. Often we like to simplify what we like about pacing, whether we like a fast-paced or a slow-paced or a whatever book. But actually, the pacing has to be right for the book. And O'Hagan is able to vary the pace in this book to suit what is happening and to highlight and elongate the moments that he wants and to really connect you with the feeling of grief and sadness around this event. I think that is the thing that makes it the saddest book that I've ever read. Cleopatra by Stacey Schiff is a non-fiction book about Cleopatra. There's not a lot to say about this other than this is how you write non-fiction. Perfectly executed book. I want to know about Cleopatra. I want to know about the anecdotes and the stories that you uncover through your research, but I also want to know about the people of Egypt and the people of Rome. I want to know about all of these rumors that I've heard about Cleopatra and whether they're true or not and who started them and what's real and what's not. And this book does it all. You get to learn about the day-to-day lives of the Egyptians, and you get to learn a cool story about Mark Antony going fishing. If you've got any interest at all in Cleopatra, and it doesn't need to be a lot, you definitely need to read this. Love and Virtue by Diana Reid is an Australian novel about an 18-year-old girl who is in her first year of university, living away from home on university for the first time. She develops feelings for one of her professors and pursues him, but at the same time, she sort of figures out that she got blind drunk and was raped at a party, and one of her friends is trying to encourage her to deal with that. I think this is a wonderfully complex novel around the idea of sex and power and virtue. On top of all this, there's a wonderful little undertone of political satire going through this that is very subtle but very good. 10 minutes and 38 seconds in This World by Alif Shafak is the story of a prostitute who is dying, and these are her last thoughts. These are the 10 minutes and 38 seconds that it will take her body to shut down, and she is remembering things. Now, obviously, there is a little bit of creative license because that would leave you with a very short story. Through this life, Shafak is able to explore so many things about life in Istanbul and Turkey, and it's through Tallulah Layla's friends that we really get to see so much of this. I felt like this was the opposite of Kim Jong, born 1982, whereas that shows you all the little things that women have to put up with. This shows you all the huge things that women have to put up with. This shows you all the massive injustices that you shouldn't be ignoring. Not that you should ignore the micro stuff either. This is a book that I really struggle to find any flaws at all. This is an absolutely perfect read, and when we're at this level, there's still more to come. So that gives us our top 10. And at number 10, it's Women Talking by Miriam Taves. This is a story about a Meta-Knight community. The women there are being attacked by monsters as they sleep. They're waking up with cuts and bruises. They don't know what's going on. They believe they're being possessed by demons because that is what the Bible tells you. That is the limit of their knowledge. And it turns out that they are being drugged by the men of the village and raped. And the men have gone off because the police have been called. And the women have this choice. Are they going to stay and fight, or are they going to leave? All you have is the conversation between the women who are split into these two camps, fight or leave. Such an innovative dystopian novel that, for me, this is like The Handmaid's Tale plus. The systems in place to control these women are so hard to break away from. That when they're talking about their actions, whether they should fight or leave, when you have somebody that wants to leave and they're criticizing somebody that wants to stay and fight, and you realize how pointless staying and fighting is, and you're like, well, you have to leave because that situation is horrible. And then you realize again from the other point of view, and you're, oh, well, that situation is also horrible, you can't possibly. And it's just so many little things in this book, like how these women are not taught to speak English. They're taught to speak an ancient Mennonite language that is no longer spoken by anybody other than the Mennonites. So if they wanted to leave and get a job, they have to work in a foreign language to them. The Girl with the Louding Voice by Abby Dari. This is a story of a girl who wants to be educated, and the universe is conspiring against her so that she will not be educated. The universe wants to marry her off to an older man. The universe wants her to work cleaning house. The universe wants her to become a prostitute. She has been pushed into all these things by powerful men in her life. But what she wants is a voice, and she doesn't want any voice. She wants a louding voice. This novel, based in Nigeria, also sort of discusses the advantage of knowing English. And even in that title, you can see that Adani's English is not very good. Her tenses are back to front, but she's also able to make herself understood. And I think this adds this wonderful colonialness to it. It's a coming of age novel, and to be honest, I cannot understand how anybody cannot think that this book is amazing. This is just such a complete and simple and good book. If I was to recommend the viewer as a collective, as a I don't know who you are, then this is the book that I would recommend, because it is the safest book that I think I have read in a long time, as long as you check the trigger warnings, because all of these books are a bit nasty like that. Careless by Kirsty Capes is the story of Bess, who is a 15-year-old girl who is in love for the first time and is pregnant. She's also a foster child and in the foster system. I don't think I need to tell you too much more about this book for you to realize how that is going to be messy and good and interesting, and how those themes intersect. But I want to remind you that she is 15 years old. I think a lot of time when you see 15, you sort of think, oh, well, do I really want to read about a 15-year-old? Yeah, you absolutely do. Her naivety is part of what is brilliant. If that's not enough, Bess's best friend Ishel is about to enter an arranged marriage and is the victim of quite a lot of racism. Such a good book, and I'm absolutely flabbergasted that the Women's Prize judges did not put this on the shortlist. The second Miriam Taves in the top 10 is Fight Night. Look, I'm a sucker for anything overtly socialist, and the quickest way to grab an extra star is to make your book funny. And I think both of those things are definitely there in Fight Night. It's such a playful novel about 3 generations of women who are really fighting against the society. They really don't get along with what's expected of them. And when the mother gets pregnant again and the grandmother gets ill, we sort of have to move from Canada into America and do a bit of a road trip. I am so impressed with how Miriam Taves is able to weave conversations about different topics seamlessly into this narrative to create such a wonderful, complete, complex tapestry of a novel. I didn't know whether I should have laughed, cried, been taking notes and thinking. This book does so much. It's such a good book. The Future is read by Catherine Valente. I am so shocked by how much I loved this book. Catherine Valente, for me, is the sort of author that I look at and I go, I'm going to enjoy this book. This book is safe. I'm going into this book knowing that it's going to be a 4-star read. I'm going to have fun. I'm going to like it. I'm going to be happy. I'm going to be satiated. And then I'm going to move on to the next book. To have it be one of the best books that I have read this year, potentially ever, is so incredible. A dystopian, comedy, literary, sci-fi, wacky, weird world. This takes place on a blob of rubbish that is floating in the Pacific, the size of Texas. This is the last place that life has survived on Earth. Human life has survived on Earth. They don't have access to natural resources. They don't have access to growing plants and trees. Valente is not sure whether to turn this into an opportunity to tell jokes, or to turn this into an opportunity to paint a picture of a desolate and stark future in like a sci-fi sort of situation. So she does both. I am so impressed with people that can say profoundly interesting and thought-provoking things while also being incredibly funny and keeping me engaged in the storyline. They are three completely different skills, and if you can do two of them, I'm going to really enjoy your book. Valente is clearly just a master writer, because I believe she could write any genre she turned her pen to and do it well. And now we're at the top 5, and at number 5 it's The Book of Form and Emptiness by Ruth Ozeki. This won the Woman's Prize this year, and what a good book it was. This tells the story of Benji. Benji hears voices, he hears objects talk to him. He's also recently lost his father and has to be looked after by his mother on her own. Her mother is, of course, suffering from grief about losing her partner, and she is having her own mental health issues as well, but they're completely different from Benji's. I think that this is one of the things that really brings this novel up. It is having similar but different themes. We have a lady who is depressed and is hoarding things and is really struggling to cope with all of the pressures that her life has put on her, and fair enough too. And then we have this boy, this precocious young boy who is navigating the world and is meeting women that he likes for the first time and can have conversations with staplers and scissors and books. And the whole time, the narrator for this is a book who is talking to Benji in the future and telling Benji his story. Let's be honest, this book really should have been a mess. It shouldn't have been a book that I enjoyed. This is something that I find that Ozeki can just do. She can write the most messy, confusing novel and keep you invested in the characters and keep you understanding what's going on and not have you guessing and not being confused. That is a talent and a half. That she wrote so much of this book in the second person narrative, and it barely registered with me. And let's face it, books written in the second person narrative are terrible, and this is not. At number 4, we have A Tale for the Time Being by Ruth Ozeki. Ruth Ozeki has become my favourite author this year. I've read 3 books by her, and they've all been knockout amazing. A Tale for the Time Being. Again, we have this book in it. This author called Ruth has found a diary at a used bookshop, and she's reading the story of a Japanese American girl who has spent time both in the US and in Japan, and she is writing a diary entry to the Time Being, who in theory could be Ruth, the author, who is clearly an author insert character in the quite literal sense. Ruth is worried about this girl because she's going through some traumatic stuff, and so she's researching her on Wikipedia and trying to find out what's going on. But whenever she gets a breadcrumb online, the power goes out or something goes wrong, her Wi-Fi drops out. She never quite figures out if this girl is even real and what this diary is. I just thought this was such a wonderfully complex novel. We're dealing with bullying, we're dealing with confidence, we're dealing with mental health, we're dealing with coming of age, and we're dealing with clash of cultures, and so much of this intersects, and there's just so much. You could pick a theme and it's in this book. Sorrow and Bliss by Meg Mason is at number 3. I am a sucker for a book that will get you inside of the head of a character who is not happy. And that is exactly what Sorrow and Bliss does. Martha is suffering from a mental illness. Martha is so sad, she's so suicidal, but she's also delightfully charming. She's hilarious. It's so weird because it often feels like you're reading quite a happy, upbeat novel, and then like it descends into disaster, which gets you sort of like questioning the reality of the people you observe, if they're happy in their life or not, like how much of it is mask and how much of it isn't mask. You have the mother-daughter relationship, you have sister relationship, you have questions of parenting. But for me, it's the interplay between the like devastatingly sad moments and the wit and the humor that Meg Mason writes that really elevates this book to something quite special, in my opinion. At number 2 is Akwaeke Emezie's memoir, Dear Centurion. I was a little bit skeptical that Akwaeke Emezie could write a memoir that would be interesting. I'm like, isn't it a bit arrogant to assume that you, who are in your 30s, have something interesting to say when all you've done is write a couple of books? And it's really dismissive of me to have thought that, because Akwaeke Emezie has the most interesting brain of anybody. They've also had a really messed up life. The stuff that they went through in Nigeria as a child is full-on Holocaust horrible stuff. That they deal with chronic pain, they deal with exploitation, they deal with men who want to use them, and they try and forge a writing career. On top of this, I find it so hard to get my head around Emezie's gender identity, of being an Obanji, of having a gender identity that is, I am a god, deal with it. It's actually delightfully funny the way that Emezie is able to slip into like an arrogant mode in their self-taught. Being an Obanji must give them such self-belief. This idea that your gender and your spirituality are interlinked is something that I really struggle to. As somebody who has never questioned their gender, and when they force themselves to, they're like, no, you're pretty comfortable, that's what you are. But when you start to sort of go, well, actually, there's not just two genders, and we're going to link it to this folkloric identity you have, and you're actually a god and you will live again, and oh my god, what is going on? If you want a book that is going to make you think, and is going to connect you with emotional issues as well, just read this memoir. Lastly, look, I don't think it's a big secret what my favourite book so far of the year is. It is Craig Silvey's Honeybee. I have a book review out on this. This deals with a trans girl realising that she is in fact a trans girl through a failed suicide attempt. They go to jump off a bridge at the same time as a man goes to jump off a bridge, and the two of them develop this really unusual friendship. We deal with like toxic masculinity and abuse. We deal with how banks fuck people over. We deal with Vietnam vets and their treatment when they return from Vietnam. The things that Silvey has linked together by having two very different characters, such an oddball friendship, old and young, cis and trans, man and woman, rich and poor. It allows themes to intersect that never intersected before. I think this is an absolutely incredible book, and I apologise to people who struggle to get it, because it is an Australian novel that is maybe not the most available, but you can get an audiobook of it if you like audiobooks. Maybe go down that route. Personally, I really love this because some of the events that happen in Vic's life in this novel have happened in mine, and I felt so uncomfortable and ill at ease reading this novel, but also like validated and seen as well, that I've not had that experience in a novel for a long time. Normally nobody quite gets me, and I still think that it's a fantastic novel, but that clearly elevates it to from a 5-star read to just something absolutely standout special for me. So that's the 30 books that I've given 5 stars to. Which one of these books are you going to go out and pick up? Which one of these books do you agree with? Which one of these books do you disagree with? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Give this video a thumbs up, and please subscribe for more great bookish content.